Ooh, Joe Biden said he don't care what you think. He's pardoning his son. He said Hunter's off that crack. He's off that crack. It's all politically motivated. He's pardoning his son. You just leave him alone.
Ain't no mountain that I can't climb, baby. All this gold in my way. 'Cause there's a time when you're right, and you know you must fight. Who's laughing, baby? Don't you know? And it's the choice that we make, and this choice you will take. Who's laughing, baby? So just leave me alone. Leave me alone.
Welcome to the Comparison Guy podcast. Today is December 9th. How is it December already? Doesn't it feel like the election just happened like a week ago? But it's December 9th. Welcome to the Comparison Guy podcast. Listen on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And thank you so much. I know, particularly at this time of year, it's an investment. It's an investment of your time to listen to a podcast that's 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes long. So sincerely, thank you to the people who have been listening more lately. I've noticed people listening more. People are probably sharing more. Some people subscribing more. So thank you so much for that. I know people get impatient. They don't want to wait for you to say thank you, but every now and then I got to thank people. Thank you. I'm going to talk about the Hunter thing for just 2 seconds, just to tell Joe what he should have done. What he should have done. I always got to step in and be the voice of reason and explain to these Democrats what they ought to be doing. Can't figure it out for themselves. And then I'm going to talk about who's influencing the influencers. I'll answer that question. Very simple, very basic question. I'm going to play clips to illustrate the influencers we have right now and the influencers we should have and could have. And I'm going to discuss why the heck are we allowing this to happen? Why are we allowing ourselves to be influenced in the way that we are? But first, Hunter Biden. Joe, you should have commuted the sentence. That's what you should have done. You should have just done a commutation. That way, you say, hey, I told you I wasn't going to pardon my son, and I didn't. I didn't pardon Hunter. I commuted his sentence. Now, I know it's a little thin. It's a little bit of he found a loophole around being called a liar by saying, I said I didn't pardon him. I commuted the sentence. But it works a little bit better. It works a little bit better because let's all be honest. We all got to be honest here. I hate what's going on with the spin. I've said it a million times. You know how I feel about it. The hypocrisy, the inconsistency. I hate it. We got to be honest. It's bull what Joe did. He said he wasn't going to pardon his son. Then he did pardon his son. And to say I was worried about what would happen in a Trump administration, a Trump Justice Department, or it was all politically motivated. If it wasn't for the fact that I was running for re-election, Hunter never would have been indicted or charged or whatever. It's all bull. Hunter did what he did. Hunter admits he did what he did. He pled guilty even though he admits, oh yeah, that was me. I filled out the form to get a gun knowing I was on drugs and I didn't pay my taxes. So it's not like he's not guilty of what he was charged with. So allow him to continue to be guilty. Don't pardon him and remove the guilty charges, commute his sentence, and that means he just doesn't have to go to jail. That would have been a decent compromise for me. Because by pardoning Hunter, giving him a full pardon on everything, just a broad, across the decades pardon on everything, it's like you're not acknowledging that he did do what he was charged with. And you're also going outside of what you claimed was politically motivated. The couple of things that were politically motivated, particularly the gun charge. They say, nobody gets charged with that, or certainly no one goes to jail for that. Okay, well, people do go to jail for not paying taxes. Wesley Snipes wants to speak to you about that, about the pardon on that. So people do go to jail for that. And why do you have to give such a broad pardon if those were the things that you thought were politically motivated. Other things that he might have been charged with in the future, not registering as a foreign lobbyist, whatever. So, as I say, commutation. He should have commuted the sentence. It would have been smarter. It would have been easier for the Democrats to defend going forward. And I would say the same thing to Donald Trump about the January 6th folks. The same thing. Consistency. That's the name of the game here. Donald, don't pardon people who committed those crimes, who we know committed those crimes, in some cases pled guilty to the crimes. Don't pardon them. But there are some people whose sentences you could commute. The people who the Supreme Court has already ruled were overcharged. There were people who were there on January 6th who could have been charged with trespassing or disturbing the peace or resisting whatever. More minor crimes than an insurrection or whatever they were charged with. What do you call that? Like things like disorderly conduct. You could charge someone with disorderly conduct as opposed to an insurrection, and that wasn't done. They were overcharged. The Supreme Court has ruled they were overcharged. They spent time in jail. So those people go ahead and commute the sentence, but don't pardon them because they did do what they did. Some of them have pled guilty to it, smashing windows or pushing down barriers or going into the Capitol when they know they shouldn't have gone into the Capitol. So allow those charges to remain on their record, but go ahead and commute the sentence. They can get out of jail for those people, not the most serious charges, people given 15, 20 years. I'm not talking about pardoning those people, but that would be a reasonable compromise if Donald Trump did that, in my opinion, to just move past all of this, to just move past it and stop fighting about it constantly and pointing the fingers and having to deal with the hypocrisy of people saying, oh, Joe Biden, the man, he's just above reproach. He's just above reproach. This is the way you're supposed to behave when you're president of the United States, Donald Trump. That's what was said. When Joe Biden kept saying over and over again, I'm not going to pardon my son. I'm not going to pardon my son. I'm not going to pardon my son. People said, you see, Trump supporters, you see, MAGA people, this is the way a president is supposed to behave. And then he pardoned his son. And all those same people went, hey, look, I get it. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. That's what Whoopi Goldberg said on The View. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. I was going to play the clip, but I'm already talking about this too long. But that's what she said. They sat there, they had a discussion, and Whoopi Goldberg basically came down to, hey, I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. I guarantee you, if I wanted to, I could go back and I could find a clip of Whoopi Goldberg saying that she admired Joe Biden for not pardoning his son. Now when he does it, hey, what's good for the goose, good for the gander. If people would listen to me, if they'd listen to me, they would know there is a perfect example that you could find of Donald Trump doing the exact same thing when he was president. If you'd listen to me and pull your head out of your you-know-where and be constantly hypocritical and inconsistent, I've talked about it before. When Donald Trump was president, get this, people, get this. I don't know if anybody else has said this. When Donald Trump was president, he put in place a rule, an executive order perhaps, that if you worked in his administration, you could not go and work for a lobbying firm or work in some sort of occupation where you enriched yourself as a result of your time in the White House. He put that rule in place, and everyone praised Donald Trump for that as a guy draining the swamp. Everybody said, you see there? That's why we elected Donald Trump. He's going to drain the swamp. He's got this rule because that's the problem. These people, they work in Washington, D.C., and then they run right out and they go get a nice, high-paying, 7-figure cushy job because of their time spent working in the White House. And Donald Trump was putting a stop to that. And then Donald Trump undid the rule in the last 2 weeks of his administration. He undid the rule on the way out the door. Look it up if you don't believe me. He undid the rule. And that allowed his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, to go and enrich himself with the Saudis, make billions of dollars with the Saudis. And so people know that, but they don't make the connection. It's the same sort of thing. It's like you promised that you were going to end this type of behavior, and then you broke the promise on your way out the doggone door, and your own son-in-law got rich because of it. That's the comparison that you should be making, Democrats. If you want to call the BS on this whole situation, that's the comparison. So when you're talking to your friends and they're saying, he's a liar, Joe Biden's a liar, he said he was going to not pardon his son, then he pardoned his son. Well, Donald Trump put a whole rule in place that you couldn't enrich yourself when you left the White House, and then he undid the rule and his own doggone son-in-law went and enriched himself. You could listen to me and get information like that, or you could listen to other people and go, hey, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. You could go with that ironclad argument. Let's move on. Holy smokes, that took like almost 12 minutes. This is going to be really difficult for me to do in a reasonable amount of time. I could talk about this for 20 hours. Who's influencing the influencers? There are smart listeners here. I am not going to waste time talking about who the influencers are. We've talked about the media here. We've talked about we know who the influencers are. I'm obviously not talking about social media influencers, okay? That's stupid nonsense. I'm talking about the influencers when it comes to politics. This is a politics show. So the influencers, what we think, what we discuss, who we vote for, all of this stuff, we know who the influencers are. But who is influencing them? Who's influencing them to put out what they put out? Who? We are. We are. Simple as that. They're influenced by money, by making money, cold hard cash, the green stuff, greenbacks, cheddar, a little scratch. If the Wu-Tang Clan has taught me nothing, they've taught us cream. Cash rules everything around me. Dollar bills, y'all. It's all about money. So in order to make money, you need people to be paying attention to what the heck you're doing. When you're an influencer, you can't influence anybody if nobody's listening to you. Trust me, I know. And so I do what I do because I think it's the right thing to do. I think I'm saying the right thing. I want to be honest. I want to be consistent in what I'm saying. And so I don't have as much influence. I don't have as many people who are accepting the message I'm putting out. Now, I do think it's just I don't have the exposure. I don't have the reach. You know, I'm a nobody. Nobody knows who I am. But the people who do have the reach, who do have the exposure, who've got millions of people perhaps listening to them, they are influenced by the people who are listening to them. They put an episode out. If that episode's popular, they say to themselves, okay, that's what people like. If someone on Twitter, on X, sends out a tweet, it gets a bunch of engagement, a bunch of likes. They go, okay, that's what people like. So as I said, it's a very easy question to answer. Who influences the influencers? And it goes with anything, with TV. I mean, there's a reason why we have so many reality singing show competitions. Because that seems to be what people like, what they enjoy. They like to see celebrity judges sitting there judging regular people trying to sing in some form or fashion. So anyone can be an influencer. You can be a good influencer. You can be a bad influencer. Teachers, parents, siblings, people who volunteer their time to be role models. These can be good influencers because they're not necessarily in it for the money or any type of power. And then we can have good influencers who are on social media or who are in the media, cable news or TV or on radio. They can be good role models or influencers if they want to be. But unfortunately, most influencers, when it comes to politics, are in it for their own personal gain. That's the problem that we have right now. The influencers that are getting the most attention, that are making the most money, that have the most power to influence are in it for their own personal gain. Which for us to not realize that and realize that we are the influencers who are influencing the people who are influencing, and we're allowing that, there's something seriously wrong with that. There's just a complete and total disconnect of what's going on and what's ethical and what's right. And I got to be careful here. Because I'm a capitalist, and I'm not so sure capitalism is not built on the idea of influencing for personal gain. I mean, that's what capitalism is, convincing somebody to buy what you're selling for your own personal gain. So I got to be careful. I'm not saying that people should not be allowed to make money. I do believe in the creed of, hey, look, buyer beware. So if you want to listen to certain people, if you want to watch certain TV shows, if you want to trust certain politicians, fine. That should be allowed. First Amendment, freedom of speech. People can say what they want to say. They can influence how they want to influence, and they can make money doing it. I just don't understand why we seem to be so oblivious to it. That's what I don't get. I don't get why we seem to be so oblivious to what's being done in this country in regards to the information that we're getting from the influencers that we're getting it from on both the left and the right. People are just oblivious to it. They seem to be oblivious to the true damage that it's doing. How can we be so oblivious to the damage and even to when it's happening? There's a dead giveaway. If you have been listening to this podcast and you suddenly find yourself kind of agreeing with everything that I'm saying, there's a good chance I've sold out. If someone is on the left and they suddenly start to feel like, you know what? I like everything this guy says. I like everything he says about the Democrats, about the Democratic Party. I like everything he says about Trump and his administration and how bad all the people are that he's picking. I like all that. There's a good chance I've sold out because there's no way. There is no way in politics you should agree with everything anyone says. There's just no way. If you're listening to a program, if you're watching a program, if you have a favorite podcast that you listen to, and it's your favorite podcast because they always tell you that you were right. You were right. You guessed it. You thought it, and you were right. The election, you were spot on. Kamala Harris ran a fantastic election. She didn't do anything wrong. The only problem was the country's racist, and she didn't have enough time. If you're listening to people who are trying to find the silver lining, trying to find a silver lining to the loss for the Democrats by saying, hey, it wasn't even that big a margin of victory. As elections go, the popular vote margin wasn't even that big. If you're listening to people telling you that, when a United States men's hockey team beat the Russians in the Olympics back in 1980, it was a miracle on ice. The final score didn't matter. The margin of victory didn't matter. It was a miracle because a bunch of amateur college students playing hockey had no business beating the greatest hockey team in the world at that time, grown adult male Russians. That's why it was and will forever be known as a miracle. The miracle on ice. Because it was impossible, improbable that it would ever happen. But if you're listening to influencers who are trying to tell you that miracle on ice wasn't that big a deal, trying to tell you the margin of victory was so small this election wasn't a big deal, well, you're wasting your time listening to that nonsense. You should have been listening back in 2023 when I probably said a half dozen times on this podcast, if Donald Trump wins, it will be a miracle, and the miracle will be the Democratic Party. I said it a half dozen times. Don't worry, I'm putting together that clip show I've been talking about for year's end, and I'm going to play some of those clips along with a whole bunch more of what I said all throughout 2023 and 2024 leading up to the election. And one of the things I said was if Donald Trump pulls this off, it will not be because of Donald Trump. It will not be because of him. The guy's got a 40% approval rating in his own family. It won't be because of him or anything he does. It will be because of the Democrats. The Democrats and their inability to see themselves for what they are, they will be what puts Donald Trump in office. And if you're listening to influencers who are denying that, who aren't telling you that, who don't want to hear that, who don't want to accept that, stop listening to them. I'm telling you, just like I kept saying back in 2023, stop listening to them. Stop listening to the people who are telling you, no, don't worry about those polls. Don't worry about those polls. It's early. Nobody's paying attention. Everybody's going to come on home when it comes time to vote. Don't worry. When it comes to politics, if you're listening to someone you always agree with or always makes you feel good, there is a good chance you're being lied to. There's a very good chance you're being lied to. You got all these people jumping off Twitter X. I'm going over to Blue Sky. I'm sick of the toxicity over there on Twitter. Twitter is just a toxic place, and I'm leaving. Now, if I wanted to make you feel good and I wanted to lie to you, I would tell you that's why people are leaving Twitter, because it's just too toxic a place. But that would be lying to you. No, people are leaving Twitter because they're mad Kamala Harris lost. And on one hand, they want to stick it to Elon. And on the other hand, they don't want to have to deal with it. They don't want to have to face that on their Twitter. They don't want to have to face people saying, ha, 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 Kamala lost. And so they're leaving Twitter. That's why. Not because it's toxic. You know how I know that? Because if Kamala Harris had won, Twitter would still be just as toxic. Elon Musk would still own Twitter, and those people would be on Twitter. And they would be on Twitter going, ha, 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 Donald Trump lost. That's how I know. That's honest. You agree or you disagree? All those people who are leaving Twitter claiming it's just a toxic place and I don't want to deal with it and I can't have discussions with people. No, you're leaving because you're pissed. You're pissed that Kamala Harris lost. That's why you're leaving Twitter. Be honest. This is where it starts, Democrats. I'm sorry. Look, the right, conservatives, Republicans, they're going down the path they're going down with Donald Trump for the next 4 years. I have no doubt in that. No doubt whatsoever. They are not standing up to Donald Trump. There is no benefit in standing up to Donald Trump and what he wants to do. So the left, who were depending on to hold this country together in some form or fashion, this is where it starts, by being honest with what's influencing you. To tell me that Twitter is too toxic a place and I'm leaving Twitter, when I constantly see on Twitter trending hashtags that aren't the nicest in the world. Hashtag MAGA morons, hashtag Trump smells. A whole thing going on for a long time there about Trump's bodily odor, how Trump smells. He stinks. After a man got killed at a rally, after a man got shot and killed at a Trump rally and Trump got grazed by a bullet, do you think Twitter was a place where the left came together and prayed for the safety of Donald Trump? Huh? Or do you think within 2 seconds it was a toxic place where people were instead saying, hey, Republicans don't want tough gun laws, so it kind of serves them right. That's what people said on Twitter. You tell me I'm wrong. You tell me I'm lying. And they're the ones saying Twitter was toxic, as if they had no hand in that. Some of the biggest groups, as I've told you a million times, but I want people to notice, I want people to understand it because it drove me absolutely crazy, that I would try and tweet out meaningful discussion and get no responses, but the second somebody throws up a picture of Donald Trump with a stupid look on his face, you get 10,000 likes and you get 50,000 responses to caption this photo. Say something funny about the look on Donald Trump's face. That's the place that people are complaining was too toxic. And that's all they did on Twitter. That's all they used Twitter for. The influencers. The biggest influencers. That's what they use Twitter for. Including Joe and Mika from Morning Joe. Oh, he went on a rant. I want to talk about it so bad. He went on a rant the other day that I listened to. I hadn't been listening to the show. I haven't been listening to pretty much anything for the last couple of weeks. Not by choice. I just been busy. But I saw he went on a rant, so I said, let me go hear this rant. And he went on for 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Still trying to defend him and Mika scurrying down to talk to Donald Trump. I at some point, maybe I'll talk about it. But I want to stick to what I'm saying here now about Twitter and about the toxicity of Twitter. Listen to this clip. I've played this for you before.
By the way, I want to say, everybody's talking about weird. Oh, we got this weird thing, weird. Who's been talking about weirdos, insurrectionists, and freaks for like 3 years?
I think it might have been.
They're weirdos, insurrectionists, and freaks. That's how you. Democrats are like, I'm so shocked. I said, don't be shocked. Call them what they are. They're weirdos, insurrectionists, and freaks.
Vice President
like the
Kamala
extremist
Harris
store.
and former President.
That's Joe Scarborough on Morning Joe on MSNBC on August 5th. If you want to check it out, if you want to hear in context, they were talking about J.D. Vance or something prior to that. But weirdos, insurrectionists, and freaks, that's what they are. Said it more than one time on the show, but that was the time I heard it and made a note of it. I said, well, that's weird, him to be saying something like that. Not very helpful. And the reason why it was so weird to me is because I can remind you that a man got shot in the head and killed at a Trump rally, and Donald Trump, presidential candidate, was grazed by a bullet at a rally on July 13th. On July 13th. So roughly 20 days later, Morning Joe was on his show calling Trump supporters weirdos, insurrectionists, and freaks. Now, do I really have to go and play clips of what they said after that comedian called Puerto Rico an island of floating garbage? Do I have to play their reaction to that? Of course not. You know what they said. I don't have to waste our time. You know what they said. So here they are calling the entire Trump MAGA base weirdos, insurrectionists, and freaks, and it doesn't even come close. Doesn't even come close to the worst things he has said on that show about Donald Trump and about Trump supporters. Doesn't even come close. Once again, I've played the clips for you in the past. Not to defend Donald Trump, not to defend all of his supporters. Oh, no. I said it's legitimate criticism what's hurled at Donald Trump, and in some cases, some of his supporters, not all. The stuff that went on January 6th, it's very legitimate criticism. The attacks on people who manned the polls on the election that Donald Trump lost, the lies about the election lost. It's valid criticism. But don't sit there and act like you're above all the toxicity, is my point. Don't leave Twitter acting like you don't know why you're being attacked for going down and talking to the man that you've been saying for the past year and a half is Adolf Hitler. Don't act all innocent and surprised by that. Don't spend 20 minutes on your show ranting and raving about people and saying you'll quit. Quit if you're going to quit. That's what he said. I'm going to quit. Quit, Joe. Quit, because you're a bad influencer. If you're not going to accept your role in what's going on in the country right now, not going to accept your hypocrisy, not going to accept your inconsistencies, not going to accept your dishonesty, quit. Nobody's going to miss you. Go off with Mika and play that bad music if you're going to be part of the problem and not part of the solution. You're part of the problem, and you're too arrogant to see it. You're no different than a Tucker Carlson or a Sean Hannity. Your show is no different than a Fox and Friends in the morning. It's all the same. It's all hypocrisy and inconsistency. You praised Joe Biden when he promised he wouldn't pardon his son, and then you praised Joe Biden when he pardoned his son. Thank you, Janae Seltzer, whatever her name is. Here, listen. You talk about who the heck is Jan Seltzer? Listen.
And Iowa pollster Jan Seltzer is retiring from election polling after 25 years of predicting results. She had conducted the Iowa polling since 1997, while widely regarded for her analysis. Seltzer's latest presidential poll missed badly. Trump won Iowa by 13 points, despite her numbers showing Kamala Harris ahead just days before the vote.
Okay, it's Jan Seltzer. That's her name. The letter J, Ann Seltzer, an Iowa pollster who quit. She quit her job. She messed up so bad. She was so bad at predicting the election, this year's election, that she said, you know what? I better quit. I'm horrible at this. So quit, Joe. Quit, Joe Scarborough. Quit, Joy Reid. Quit anyone who was so bad at predicting what the outcome of this election was going to be, who was so bad at strategizing for the Democratic Party and for Kamala Harris, who were so bad at discussing what Kamala Harris should be doing and shouldn't be doing. She doesn't need to do interviews. She doesn't need to talk about her positions, her flip-flops. Quit. Hillary Clinton can't quit. She doesn't have a job, but listen to this. And that is what, in my opinion, could really cost Joe Biden the election. Here, I'll let this person tell you what the new political stance is from the left.
Biden versus Trump. We
Yes,
know that.
it is. It is.
What do you say to voters who are upset that those are the two choices?
Get over yourself. Those are the two choices.
Yeah, love that.
Right? And
good.
you know.
Oh, great. Oh, I like that. You hear Jimmy? That's Hillary Clinton on Jimmy Fallon. Oh, what do you say to people who aren't happy about the two choices? Get over yourself. That's the Democrats' new position. Get over yourself. Get over it. In other words, you don't like something? Oh, well, get over it. That attitude could cost Joe Biden the election. From my podcast back in June, on a show, an episode entitled The Reason Biden Could Lose. Back in June, The Reason Biden Could Lose. That was the episode. People didn't like the title of the episode. People didn't want to listen. Oh, that sounds negative. I don't want to listen to that. So people didn't want to listen. They want to listen to an influencer, Hillary Clinton, on the show of another influencer, Jimmy Fallon, saying, hey, what do you say to these people who don't like the two choices? Get over yourself. Those are your two choices. I said, what? Are you insane? Are you insane giving that answer, alienating people like that? And then they got rid of Biden, brought in Kamala, and people said, I don't know anything about Kamala. I want to hear her answer some questions. And people said, get over yourself. Essentially, the same thing. These are your choices. These are your choices. I played you the clip where they belittled a guy on Bill Maher who said, I'm not voting for Trump, but I don't know with this Kamala. I don't know. And they belittled the guy, laughed at him, berated him. And there were millions of people out in the country who clearly had the same problem, didn't want to vote for Trump, but were not happy with Kamala, and they were told essentially, get over yourself, these are the two choices, but you were wrong. You were wrong. There was a third choice. People could just stay home. People could just stay home. And if you were an influencer and you were telling people, get over yourself, these are your two choices, quit. Quit. Because that's what you do when you're bad at your job. Quit. You ought to get fired. Every last one of them should be fired. They were so horrible at the messaging surrounding this election on the Democratic side. Absolutely atrocious. And I sat here for a year and pointed it out. I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry. I'm hesitant to say things like that because I don't want to piss people off and have them go, oh, this guy thinks he knows everything. I don't know everything, but I knew that. I'll tell you that. I knew that clearly for a year. And I pointed out for a year that the Democrats were screwing up. And if you were listening to influencers who were telling you, no, we're doing just great. Things are going fine. Everything's looking good for us. Everything's looking good. We got this all under control. Well, they were wrong. What do you do when you're listening to people who are consistently wrong? You stop listening to them. You stop listening to them. You definitely stop listening to them if they try and tell you, well, we weren't really that wrong. We weren't really that wrong. I mean, he didn't win by that much. Listen to this on a whole nother topic. It's not just being wrong about Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or Donald Trump. Listen to this.
Look, we all have to acknowledge that inflation has been tough. There's no doubt that we went from a very benign inflation environment to that's the green line, to a considerably higher inflationary environment. Some of that was driven by supply problems. When you had supply chain problems, shortages, prices tended to go up. A lot of it was driven by the Federal Reserve and not addressing that quickly enough with interest rates. And yes, some of that is on the Biden administration with the American Rescue Plan, which most people in retrospect thought was too much.
That's goofy nerd Steve Ratner on MSNBC in July of this year. July of this year. That's how long it took him to come to the realization that inflation was due to monetary policy and spending. Supply chain issues? Absolutely. Because when you take millions of workers out of the workforce, you're going to have supply chain issues. When you don't have people to work the docks and people to drive the trucks and people to make the stuff and people to put the stuff on the shelves, you're going to have supply chain issues. So absolutely, it was supply chain issues. But you know what it wasn't? Do you know what it wasn't, comparison group? it wasn't corporate greed. It wasn't just due to corporate greed. And before you reach for the, I'm turning this guy off. That's it. That's all I can stand. I can't stand no more. I said it starting back in 2022, and I told you Joe Biden's own White House Council of Economic Advisors said it's not corporate greed. It's not corporate greed. That is not the reason for the inflation. The war in Ukraine, cutting off supply of fuel from Russia, is contributing to the higher gas prices, no question. Contributing to some of the higher prices at the grocery stores, no questions. But the American Rescue Plan, the last COVID bill, was too generous. It encouraged people to quit their jobs. It encouraged people to not go back to work. It created a shortage of workers, which led to businesses being forced to pay bonuses to try and get people to go back to work, which led to businesses having to pay higher wages to get people to go back to work. All great things for the worker, not so great for the consumer. It increased prices. The monetary policy, the Fed keeping interest rates too low for too long, too much money in the economy, led to inflation. It took him a year and a half beyond when I said it on this podcast to him saying it on MSNBC. Why are they the influencers? Why are they the people that you listen to? Don't you feel betrayed? Don't you feel lied to? Don't you at least feel like maybe these people don't know what the heck they're talking about? I'm not right about everything. But once again, I was doggone sure right about this because I said it consistently over the course of a year. Over the course of a year, anyone telling you inflation is due completely to corporate greed is lying to you. They're either lying to you or they're not well informed. It's not due to corporate greed. Corporations don't set the price. We do. That's what I told you. Corporations don't set the price. The market does. We're the market. If we spend it, they'll charge it. It's as simple as that. Corporations can't be greedy unless people have money to spend. People would not have money to spend if it wasn't for the spending by Congress and monetary policy. This stuff isn't even difficult to dissect. So if you're listening to an influencer who didn't do it, don't be mad at me. They should quit. They have been proven wrong. They should quit. But they're not quitting. They're not getting fired. They're all going, let's go over here now. Let's go over here now in the blue sky where it's not so toxic. And let's sit over here and tell each other how right we are all the time. Let's go over here where we won't have to face criticism for what we got wrong. Let's go over here where we can just talk amongst ourselves and just insulate ourselves for what makes us uncomfortable. You think that's a good idea? You can't tell me you think that's a good idea. For people in this country to further isolate themselves in their own bubbles. Even though we know that's the biggest problem we have in this country right now is two separate realities. You think it's a good idea to bail on one social media platform to run to another social media platform where everyone agrees? Where everyone sees it the same way? Where no one wants to admit what's difficult to admit? Oh, we don't all agree over here, comparison guy. Some of us think Kamala lost because of racism, and some of us think she lost because of sexism. Oh, okay. All right, sorry. No. Say what's difficult to say. Say it to people it's difficult to say it to. Say it when there is no advantage for you in saying it. Say it when there is no benefit for you in saying it. That's the influencers we need. That's the influencers we should demand. That's the influencers we used to have. We used to have in both parties, not just one, in both parties. Influencers who showed true leadership when it mattered. We are the influencers who influence the people who influence. And we're getting exactly what we're asking for. They're giving us exactly what we're asking for, unlike what we used to get.
We thank the many Muslim nations who stand with us against terror. nations that are often victims of terror themselves. Tonight's iftar also sends a message to all Americans. Our nation is waging a war on a radical network of terrorists, not on a religion and not on a civilization. As we wage this war to defend our principles, we must live up to those principles ourselves. And one of the deepest commitments of America is tolerance. No one should be treated unkindly because of the color of their skin or the content of their creed. No one should be unfairly judged by appearance or ethnic background or religious faith.
George W. Bush, after 9/11, after 9/11, talking about how our war is against a terrorist group. It's not against a religion. It's not against the Muslim religion. You know how difficult that must have been for a leader to say that? Well, it didn't seem all that difficult for George W. Bush. He said it many times. He said it many times after 9/11. We're not going to have hate in this country against people who practice a different religion. We're not going to have just a broad hate of the Muslim religion. Said it many times. No problem. Republican president. Contrast that today to what Donald Trump says, to what the Republican Party has turned into in regards to how they talk about the Muslim faith, how influencers talk about the Muslim faith. Contrast that to today. What happened? What happened?
You see, when a tragedy like this strikes, it is part of our nature to demand explanations, to try to impose some order on the chaos and make sense out of that which seems senseless. But at a time when our discourse has become so sharply polarized, at a time when we are far too eager to lay the blame for all that ails the world at the feet of those who happen to think differently than we do, it's important for us to pause for a moment and make sure that we're talking with each other in a way that heals, not in a way that wounds. But what we cannot do is use this tragedy as one more occasion to turn on each other. That we cannot do. As we discuss these issues, let each of us do so with a good dose of humility. Rather than pointing fingers or assigning blame, let's use this occasion to expand our moral imaginations, to listen to each other more carefully, to sharpen our instincts for empathy, and remind ourselves of all the ways that our hopes and dreams are bound together.
Former President Barack Obama, after the attack on Gabby Giffords, where people were killed, where a child was killed, little girl. Contrast that to the reaction after the attack on Paul Pelosi, or contrast that to the reaction after the shooting at the Trump rally, where Donald Trump came within centimeters of having his head blown off. Contrast that to the reaction. What happened? What happened? Where did that leadership go? And don't say Donald Trump happened. Donald Trump controls how you talk to people. Donald Trump controls how you interact with people on social media. Donald Trump controls how you judge people that you haven't met. Really? There wasn't even the pretense, barely the pretense of a moral imagination or empathy in those situations. The Trump rally, where a man was killed, people were injured. There wasn't even a pretense, even a thought. I wonder if we should have a memorial for the guy who got killed. No. It was, okay, yeah, sure, we all got to tone down the rhetoric. But don't stop telling the truth about Donald Trump because, oh my God, he's Hitler and he can't become president. That's what you heard if you were on the left. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. That's what you heard. Yeah, sure, we should turn down the rhetoric, but Trump can't get back in the White House, no matter what. He can't get back in the White House. So keep saying what you're saying, but stop saying what you're saying, or maybe say it a little bit differently, but what the heck, just keep saying what you're saying. That's what happened. And we didn't get any leadership. We got, what you would expect from Joe Biden and from Kamala Harris. And I don't think they wanted to see Donald Trump get killed or any of his supporters get killed. I'm not saying that. Of course not. I don't think they wanted that. But we didn't see them stand up to their own supporters. We didn't see them call out in any way their own supporters. Kamala Harris went on Howard Stern, and Howard Stern said, I love Joe Scarborough. And Kamala Harris said, yeah, I love Joe too. Joe Scarborough, the weirdos, insurrectionist, and freaks guy 20 days after a Trump supporter got killed at a rally. They love Joe Scarborough. Where did that leadership go? Where did the good influencers go? Why do we seem to only have bad influencers? And why do the bad influencers seem to be the ones getting all the attention when we influence what they say? Why? I'll tell you why. I don't just ask the question. I'll answer it for you too. Because some of the people who are influencing they're just greedy. They're just greedy. They don't care what they say. They don't care what they got to say. They don't care what lies they got to tell. They're just greedy. And they want to make money. And then there are other influencers who are sincere in what they're saying and what they're putting out there. They just have no ability to recognize that they're not right about everything, that they don't know everything, that some of what they're putting out there is not helpful. Even though they're sincere in trying to help, it's not helpful to constantly pit one group against another group and constantly point the fingers and say, look what this one said. Look what that one said. Look how horrible this one is. Look how horrible that one is. Oh, these people, they're all terrible. Oh, they're all the same. It's not helpful. It's not helpful at all. And it hardens our heart. And that's the other problem. We don't see the other side as someone we just disagree with. We see the other side as people who are evil. Not even people we hate, people we despise because they're evil. They're all evil. And so that's why we have no empathy, because our heart has been hardened, because what we've seen seems to be just beyond anything we can comprehend. This is just a disaster beyond anything we can comprehend. This Trump phenomenon that's going on in the country. People supporting Donald Trump. We can't comprehend how anyone can support Donald Trump. We're told these liberals, these woke, cancel culture liberals are going to descend the country into a socialist utopia where nobody has a gender. You don't know what to call anybody anymore. That's what we're told. That's what's going to happen. Well, it's not that bad. It's not that bad if we don't make it that bad. We're the influencers. We have the influence. We have control over how we treat each other. We have control over how we talk to one another. We have control over who we listen to. And who we listen to, who we spend our time listening to, we will influence what they say. I can remember shortly after 9/11, I'm watching the news. This is maybe a week or so after 9/11. I'm watching the news, and they go into this shop, this little store, convenience type store in New York City, and there's an Islamic guy in there, and he's there, and he's upset, he's angry. His shop is all busted up. He's got a bag, holding up a what do you call it? Something to his head because he got knocked in the head, and he's angry. He's pissed. He's going, oh, they come in here, and busted up my shop, and there's two of them, and they attack me, and they bust me in the head with a stick, and he's angry, and he's carrying on, he's screaming, he's yelling, and I'm watching it, and I'm going, oh man, that's messed up. But I'm kind of indifferent to it. I'm kind of indifferent to it because 9/11 just happened. And people are out there, they're angry, and they're mad, and they're taking it out on people of the Islamic faith. And then the guy, his whole emotions started to change. And he got real choked up. And he said, I don't know why this happened to me. I thought I was an American. And that kind of made me get choked up. I said, oh, man, oh, boy, I was kind of indifferent to it a second ago. But I felt horrible for that guy. What did he do? He didn't have any involvement in 9/11. He didn't want to see that happen. But people were angry, and so they took it out on him. And that's not right. And I realized that. I wasn't so far gone with my anger over 9/11 that I couldn't realize that. And I'm not so far gone that I would start rooting against America if I'm not happy about the outcome of this election. I'm not so far gone that I would hope that something terrible happens to Donald Trump because I'm upset about the outcome of the election. I'm not so far gone that I know for Donald Trump to fail and everything might make me feel good, but it certainly wouldn't be good for the country. I'm not so far gone to realize that. I'm not so far gone that I would say I hope the Democrats block every single thing that Donald Trump tries to do. They don't let him get anything done. That's what I hope. I hope that they treat Donald Trump the same way the Republicans treated Joe Biden. I hope they just investigate, and they impeach him again. I hope he's removed by the 25th Amendment. I'm not so far gone that I don't realize that might make me feel good, but it certainly wouldn't be good for the country. And I'm not sitting here trying to do I've come to realize we've been the change all along. I'm not trying to do that kind of episode. That's corny. That's stupid. I'm trying to do the episode of what the heck is going on? What the heck is going on? When are we going to wake up? When are we going to smarten up? When are we going to start realizing the difference between right and wrong again? When? What's it going to take? What is it going to take? What is it going to take for us to concede anything that I'm saying in this episode? Most people, the smart people, the regular listeners, you don't have any problem conceding to what I'm saying. You're like, oh, yeah, that's why I listen. This guy, he makes a point. But there are other people out there who turn the show off 5 minutes in. What's it going to take for those people to concede? Concede anything. That was the solution to one of the episodes I did, How Is This Not Biased? Where I went through and I just covered a whole range of topics that I said, how is this not biased? It's going on both sides. Don't you see it? And my solution to that, to seeing the reality of what's going on in the country, was you got to concede. Somebody has to just concede something, concede anything. And we haven't seen it. This election went the way it went, and I'm not seeing any of the people on the left doing any kind of concessions in any kind of a major way. I'm not seeing it. Not the concessions they need to make. And that's what needs to happen. People got to concede something. I need the people out there who I'm sure would say they hold the moral high ground to concede something to me. Would anyone disagree that Democrats believe they hold the moral high ground above Republicans, above MAGA? Would anyone disagree with that? So those people who hold the moral high ground, I need them to concede that for this to work out well for America, you may have to be disappointed. You may have to admit you were wrong. That's the only way we can say this ends well for America, is if Donald Trump does well. You have to concede that. Now, he's not going to be a great president. He's not going to be fantastic. We can only hope, best case scenario, he's decent, because he's crazy. The man is 80-something years old. He's not going to change who he is, or he's almost 80 years old. He is who he is. He's not very bright. He's a little crazy. So he's not going to be great, but we have to hope he can be decent. And if he's decent, we have to admit that. We have to concede to that. It shouldn't disappoint us. We shouldn't be in that place in our heads, in our own heads, that we will be disappointed if Donald Trump does well. We shouldn't be disappointed if Donald Trump picks a good labor secretary. We should concede and say, oh, hey, good, better than I thought he would pick. Not something fishy going on here. Must be payback to the union that supported him. Something fishy going on here. I mean, come on, people. To get through this, we're going to have to change our way of thinking. I know there are a lot of people out there, like a Whoopi Goldberg, like a Sonny Houston, who have been driven to insanity by what's going on in the country, and they're saying some crazy things. I get that. I'm quite sure both of them probably crawled into a box of wine the day after the election. But angry, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through the next 4 years. At some point, you got to pull yourself out of that box of wine and start to accept the role of holding the moral higher ground and start thinking in a way that's best for America. And that may include some disappointment, and that may include making some concessions. My opinion of Donald Trump hasn't changed. I hope and I pray that he can hold it together for the next 4 years. I swear I do. But my opinion of him hasn't changed. I still think he's insane. I still think that. But hey, we'll see what happens. I hope he can hold it together. I hope he can grow into the importance of what he has before him, and some of the people that he surrounds himself with, they recognize the importance of what they have before them. That's what I hope. That's what I pray for. But my opinion hasn't changed. And my opinion hasn't really changed about the Democratic Party. I hope they can figure things out and get it together and recognize their shortcomings and their flaws and what they have been doing wrong that I've been trying to tell them for 2 years now, what they've been getting wrong. I hope they can recognize it so we can have a strong, united country. 2 separate parties, but both parties strong and reasonable and willing to compromise and willing to work together when it's necessary for the good of the country, for the good of America. Not for the good of their own party, for the good of America. That's what I hope. That's easy. That's easy. We did that for generations. We can't do it now? Why? Well, because of the influencers. Because of the influencers who make more money by dividing us than uniting us. This is not hard. This is easy to figure out. Piece of cake. All we need is the motivation to do what we already know is right. That's all we need is the motivation. If the love for your country, the love for your fellow Americans, for your family, for your friends, if that's not motivation enough, I don't know what the heck would be.
But rather because only a more civil and honest public discourse can help us face up to the challenges of our nation in a way that would make them proud. We should be civil because we want to live up to the example of public servants like John Roll and Gabby Giffords, who knew first and foremost that we are all Americans and that we can question each other's ideas without questioning each other's love of country, and that our task, working together, is to constantly widen the circle of our concern so that we bequeath the American dream to future generations. They believed, and I believe that we can be better. Those who died here, those who saved lives here, they help me believe. We may not be able to stop all evil in the world, but I know that how we treat one another, that's entirely up to us. And I believe that for all our imperfections, we are full of decency and goodness, and that the forces that divide us are not as strong as those that unite us. That's what I believe, in part because that's what a child like Christina Taylor Greene believed. She had been elected to her student council. She saw public service as something exciting and hopeful. She was off to meet her congresswoman, someone she was sure was good and important and might be a role model. She saw all this through the eyes of a child, undimmed by the cynicism or vitriol that we adults all too often just take for granted. I want to live up to her expectations. I want our democracy to be as good as Christina imagined it. I want America to be as good as she imagined it. All of us, we should do everything we can do to make sure this country lives up to our children's expectations.